Under the shine of every golden age lies a quiet truth. Wealth was never safe. Not in the days of empires, not in the chaos of revolutions, not even in the supposedly stable decades between wars. From the palaces of Babylon to the villas of ancient Rome, the rich have always played a different game than everyone else. They understood that money, whether in gold coins, grain, or land, was never just wealth. It was leverage, insurance, and survival. And while ordinary people trusted the system, the elite learned to protect themselves from the system. The question isn't how they became rich. The real question, the one worth asking today, is how they stayed rich when everything around them collapsed. To understand that, we must go back to the earliest examples of concentrated wealth, when being rich didn't mean a fat bank account, but control over resources no one else could reach.
In the city-states of Mesopotamia, 4,000 years before Christ, the richest merchants and rulers didn't just store their silver in vaults. They tied it to temple loans, land leases, and trade monopolies stretching across rivers and deserts. The Sumerian kings, who ruled from cities like Ur and Lagash, protected their wealth by linking it to religion. Temples weren't just places of worship, they were the central banks of the ancient world. Seizing temple property would have been an insult to the gods, and that religious shield made elite wealth politically untouchable. The Egyptian pharaohs and their courts used a similar trick. In the Old and Middle Kingdoms, wealth was stored not in coins but in lasting, tangible assets, fertile land along the Nile, grain reserves, and gold mines in Nubia. These couldn't easily be confiscated without destroying the state itself. The ruling elite used early forms of trusts, dedicating estates to temples to ensure that they passed on to their heirs, even if central administrations changed. As a landowning elite in ancient Egypt, you didn't worry much about inflation or currency collapse. Wealth lay in land, and land produced food in a world where food was the ultimate store of value. Jump to classical Greece in the 5th century BC, and we see a different approach: diversification through mobility. Greek merchants in Athens, Corinth, and the Aegean Islands made fortunes through maritime trade. They knew that a coup or war could wipe out city treasuries, so they held deposits in multiple city-states, invested in cargo ships, and built relationships with bankers from Egypt to the Black Sea. This was an early form of offshore banking, not through secret accounts, but through physical distribution of assets. If Athens fell to Sparta, a clever merchant could sail to Rhodes and start again. Rome elevated this principle to a new level. The Roman elite, senators, generals, and the famously wealthy equestrian class knew the dangers of political instability all too well. They saw the rise and fall of dictators, the confiscation of property under Sulla and later Julius Caesar, and the overnight destruction of fortunes due to political misalignment. Their solution was a blend of diversification, political insurance, and influence over the financial system itself. Rome's wealthiest didn't hold all their assets in coins. They bought land across several provinces, invested in tax farming contracts, and lent money to foreign kings and cities, knowing repayment was backed by Roman military power. By holding assets beyond Rome's direct control, they shielded themselves from domestic confiscation. Some even stored portable wealth, gold, jewels, artworks, in safe locations far from rivals. In today's terms, they diversified not only their portfolios, but their jurisdictions. During the decline of the Western Roman Empire in the 4th and 5th centuries AD, a revealing pattern emerged. As the state's ability to enforce order collapsed,
elite families shifted their wealth from public to private, hidden assets. Instead of lending to the imperial treasury, which might never repay them, they invested in fortified estates, private armies, and direct trade networks with barbarian tribes. When Rome fell in 476, the imperial treasury was empty, but the richest families still controlled the land, the food supply, and the labor. The state was gone, yet their wealth, protected by centuries of strategic allocation, survived. The Middle Ages brought new challenges and new tools. Between the 11th and 15th centuries, Europe's wealthiest merchants and nobles used the church both as a bank and as legal protection. When kings needed money for wars, they often seized their rivals' property. But assets donated to the church. During the decline of the Western Roman Empire in the 4th and 5th centuries AD, a revealing pattern emerged. As the state's ability to enforce order collapsed, elite families shifted their wealth from public to private, hidden assets. Instead of lending to the imperial treasury, which might never repay them, they invested in fortified estates, private armies, and direct trade networks with barbarian tribes. When Rome fell in 476, the imperial treasury was empty, but the richest families still controlled the land, the food supply, and the labor. The state was gone, yet their wealth, protected by centuries of strategic allocation, survived. The Middle Ages brought new challenges and new tools. Between the 11th and 15th centuries, Europe's wealthiest merchants and nobles used the church both as a bank and as legal protection. When kings needed money for wars, they often seized their rivals' property. But assets donated to the church, in exchange for spiritual benefits, were largely untouchable. This allowed wealthy families to park their fortunes in monasteries, keeping them safe for later retrieval or management by loyal abbots. Medieval banking families, like the Medicis of 15th century Florence, combined this with a growing network of bills of exchange, an early form of paper credit, allowing wealth to move across borders without carrying gold that could be stolen. A Medici could be bankrupt in one city and rich in another, because his capital existed as ledger entries across distant markets. Meanwhile, the Islamic world during its golden age from the 8th to 13th centuries developed sophisticated systems for wealth protection. Merchants in Baghdad or Cairo used the Hawala system, an informal but trusted money transfer network that moved value without moving money. It relied on personal honor and family reputation, making it nearly impossible for rulers to seize such assets. The wealthy also invested in caravans, real estate, and long-term trade monopolies that generated income even amid political turmoil. The principle was the same as in Rome and Greece: spread risk, keep assets out of any single ruler's reach, and hide part of your wealth from the tax collector. Even in the early modern era, as centralized states grew stronger, the elite kept adapting. Between the 16th and 18th centuries, the great merchant families of Venice, Amsterdam, and London learned to tie their wealth directly to state growth, but in a way that gave them power. They bought government bonds, supplied ships for naval wars, and issued critical loans in exchange for privileges and exemptions. This made them too valuable to confiscate. They turned their wealth into a political shield. Governments could tax the common people into poverty, but the best-connected merchants saw their influence and their fortunes grow through every crisis.
What do all these examples tell us? That protecting wealth has always been about two things: control and distance. Control means owning assets that generate value regardless of politics, land, trade routes, resources. Distance means ensuring those assets are spread across systems, jurisdictions, and even forms of money, so that no single event can destroy everything.
The wealthy of the ancient world understood something most people still don't. Wealth stored only within the official system is vulnerable, and that lesson matters now more than ever. We live in an age of instant digital confiscation. Governments can freeze bank accounts with a keystroke. Currencies can be devalued overnight. Stock markets can lose a quarter of their value in a week. Inflation can quietly erode your purchasing power year after year. The elite of the past never trusted the state with all their wealth, and neither should you. The tools are different now. International diversification, precious metals, alternative assets, private equity. But the principle is the same. History doesn't repeat exactly, but the same traps return again and again. People assume stability lasts until the day it doesn't. The wealthy of the past didn't wait for disaster before moving their assets. They acted early, spread risk, and preserved long-term value. That is the true meaning of financial freedom, not just having money, but ensuring it survives the storms. If there's one lesson to take from the history of wealth preservation, it's this: the system works for those who know how to work around it. The rest, they find out too late that their safe money was never really theirs to control. If this gives you a new perspective, subscribe. History holds the answers. I'll show you where to look.